Good evening, and welcome to the April gathering of Maine Public Book Club. I'm your host, Bill Nemitz, and this evening we're chatting with Laurel Dodge about her award-winning debut novel, The Buoyant Letters of Mimsy Bell. I have to tell you, I love that title, and I love this book. It's a great book for spring, with its unwavering focus on the beauty and the power of nature, and in particular, a river with a life all its own. And at the same time, it celebrates the timeless art of letter writing as a vehicle to transport us over time, in this case, over an entire lifetime. We have a lot to talk about tonight. Before we do, a few housekeeping items. As usual, our thanks to Sherman's Maine Coast Bookshop, the Park Danforth, and Coffee by Design for their generous support of the club. Organizations like theirs make this event possible. I'd also like to thank our bookstore partners, where many of you scored your copy of The Buoyant Letters of Mimsy Bell, thanks to Bookstacks in Bucksport, None Such Books and More in South Portland, Mockingbird Bookshop in Bath, Sherman's Maine Coast Bookshops, DDG Booksellers in Farmington, Left Bank Books in Belfast, the Book Tenders in York, and Print in Portland. If you have a question for Laurel during our conversation this evening, send it to us over at fun@mainepublic.org, and I'll try to work it into the conversation. And with that, let's get started. I want to note at first that I forgot to mention before that The Buoyant Letters of Mimsy Bell, published in 2023, won a bronze medal from the Independent Publisher Book Awards, also known as the IPPY. Not bad for a first novel, Laurel, and welcome.
Thank you, Bill. I'm so pleased to be here today.
Well, it's great to have you. I'd like to start just by all of us finding out a little bit more about you. You are obviously you're a writer, but you're more than that. You've dabbled a lot in natural sciences, which shows in the book. Tell us a little bit about what brought you to this point in your journey.
Well, I was born in Maine, and as I see when I go to the places near me in the mid-coast, a lot of people with my same last name have been in this area for maybe 100 or 200 years. And after graduating from a particularly amazing high school, which no longer exists, called Oak Grove Coburn, I went to Bowdoin. And at Bowdoin, I studied environmental science and anthropology. And I went on to get a master's in environmental science. My father was also a naturalist, and so my life has been steeped in nature, and all my writing, it is a vehicle for still teaching about nature. I worked at a zoo as a teacher in New York City. I have worked at a nature center as a teacher in Connecticut, and I have done programs for land trusts in many different areas.
And then you became a novelist.
And then I became a novelist.
How did that happen? I mean, was this something that was brewing in you for a long time? Did you have a eureka moment? At what point did you say, I'm gonna go down this road?
Like many novelists, there's a couple of novels in my drawer that were completed and put away. But actually, the impetus for getting one completed and into the world was the loss of one of my dear friends, Gary, and his unwavering love of writing, and his advice that you just sit down in your seat and you write every day until it's done. So when he passed, I sat down in my seat every day until I was done. I also had a wonderful writers group that supported me.
How long ago was that you started this book?
I finished it in 2020. And I started it about 5 years before that.
Oh, okay, so this was a project.
It was a project. I have a lot of extra time, so like many women, so I write when I can snatch those moments.
Sure. I want to get into the structure of the book in a little bit, because it's unusual and fascinating. But I have to begin. Maybe many people start this way, but I have to begin with the river, which is in many ways the main character of this book. And living on the Saco River down in Buxton, it didn't take me long to figure she's talking about the Saco River. But what I found, it winds through the story. It winds through the town of, pronounce it for me, Menominee? Is that?
Menominee. Monotony.
Metonymy. Okay.
Monotony.
Okay. I was stumbling over that. Not just geographically, but culturally, and you might even say spiritually for a lot of people. And living near that river myself, I can think of many, many times when I've had that same almost visceral experience. I remember one time we were going down in our boat and with my son and my grandson, and my son said, "Stop, look, look." And we looked out over the bow of the boat just as a bald eagle came down, caught a fish 50 feet in front of us, and flew off into the trees. And it felt like a religious moment. It really did. So talk to us about why you decided to make the river, in this case, such a focal point of this story.
Well, my family lived in Fryeburg, Maine for 4 years, 4 magical years. In fact, when I asked what inspired me to write the story was we moved because of a job. And basically, I wrote this book because of homesickness for the Fryeburg and greater region, the White Mountain region. The river, I could walk about 15, 20 minutes and be at this river at the top of our hill. I went there frequently with my dog. There were amazing native plants in that region, more than where I am now. The diversity of plants and animals was incredible, but the river is a spiritual being in the area. It has a presence that actually carved out much of the landscape of the Fryeburg area and its surroundings, and probably all the way down to the sea. I like to use inanimate characters as characters and not as metaphors. Usually a river is going to be a metaphor. In this book, there's probably some metaphorical elements, but she is real, not only to Mimsy, but to all the people in the town. She is a force of her own, a goddess to some, and a devil to others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The name of the town, how did you come up with that? Why, I think it sounds like Fryeburg, but you chose this name. How did you come up with that name?
I lived on that road, actually. That's the name of the road I lived on.
Oh, okay. Okay. Ah, and I kept thinking monotony.
Yes, it took me a long time to
not because of the story, but because of the I was wondering, is it a play on words because of the sleepy life in the town? But then again, the more you get into the life in this town, it's not sleepy at all. I mean, there's a ton going on among all these people. Now, one other thing, staying on the nature theme, I also found myself fascinated with Mimsy's late in life dedication to preserving as much land around her as she could and taking what resources she had, which sounded like they were considerable, and putting it into saving the land. We have a place near my home. It's called Fuller Farm. It's run by the Scarborough Land Trust. Beautiful place, and the Nonsuch River runs through it. And I found myself thinking about you walking around up there, or juxtaposing you walking through Fuller Farm, and I wonder what goes through her head when she, goes for a walk through one of these areas. Are you composing Are you making up stories in your mind? Are you analyzing what you're seeing? What is a walk in the woods like for Laurel Dodge?
Well, for me, not for Mimsy. Okay. For me, I am analyzing constantly. My eyes are on the ground. I actually do a lot of study and research on moths and other insects. Mushrooms are also of great interest to me, and salamanders and frogs. So unlike most of my friends who I went to grad school with, I am not a birder. That's a religion that I didn't join. And so when I'm walking in the woods, I'm looking for as many insect-plant interactions as I can find. I am looking for the unexpected. You might notice from the book that the unexpected is sort of a theme of my reading, and it's the theme of my life. It's something that anything that surprises me sort of enlivens me. I like the opposite of monotony. And it is a somewhat spiritual experience to go in the woods. I wouldn't characterize it as religious. I would characterize it as having a sense of awe, like Jill Carson speaks of in her books. And I think that in Maine, many people are able to access nature and walk in the woods. But where I was living prior to that, when I was in the suburban areas of New York, many people hadn't been out on a walk in an actual woods in their lives.
Mhm.
So one
Yeah,
of the,
yeah,
yeah,
you hear that with a lot of kids that come from other areas and come for the quintessential summer experience in Maine, and their jaws are down around their knees when they experience these things for the first time. Well, we have several questions from readers, and I'm going to incorporate some of those in as we go along. Uh, by the way, you talk about you walking through the woods. It sounds a lot like Mimsy walking through the woods.
I think there's some commonalities between me and Mimsy, and the nature is the primary one, and the sense of humor is another. But
Mhm.
otherwise, I'm not a musician. I'm not actually 80 years old.
You've
Um,
never been in a rock band?
I've never been in a rock band. I'm tone deaf, and my daughter says my playlist on my iPhone is schizophrenic. So
Ah,
apparently, I'm not very musical in any way.
um,
Um,
but well, this audience member writes, Mimsy comes back to her small town after living a life of a rock star. She has a lot of feelings to work through as she comes home. Would you say that Mimsy's return was what she expected?
I would say no. I think she thought she was going to re-enter the actual community, and she finds herself bonding more with the transplants, the people who've come to this place for other reasons. They're more open to relationships. They don't have memories of her as she was, and you may notice that some of the regular townspeople have some resentment against her for leaving and becoming a rock star and then just showing back up, especially
Having the audacity to come home, right?
exactly. And that tension is shown with her and Oswald, the Reverend of the
Yeah.
Congregational.
And Biddy a little bit too, I
Yes.
would say, you know.
Yeah, I think
So
so too.
yeah, I can just hear them thinking, we read about you. We know all about you.
You know a
Uh,
little bit.
Go ahead.
And people, and I have almost always lived in small towns, except for those few times I was exiled to the suburbs. And the dynamics of a small town fascinate me. I find they're often portrayed in a negative way. So I'm trying to highlight the beauty of the small town and the connections and the generations, and then the new fresh blood that comes in this
Yeah.
book.
And how open people are to at various stages in their lives. I mean, we have Mimsy, who's 81, and then we have young Jack, who's what, is he 20? I don't even know how old. He's not that
Like
old.
15 or 16, yeah.
Yeah. Yet look at the bond, that happens there. And what I love is is just the diversity of ages and demographics in all these people and how they all kind of coalesce into their own little community within the community. And that you're right, small towns are like that. If you let them,
Yeah,
if you reach out, which she was so good at doing.
definitely. One
Uh,
thing, oops,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
go. One thing that does sort of amaze me or please me or makes me fascinated is that relationships between someone who is much older and someone who is younger, a positive relationship. And it seems almost to be freed of some expectations or freed of some limitations that closer in age friendships have. So that's something I've explored in this book as well.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about the epistolatory nature of this book. I mean, it's all letters, and it took me, as probably with everybody, a page or two before you say, maybe when you're getting on to the second or third letter, you say, oh, this is interesting. So this is how it's going to be, and it's fascinating because it you would think for the length of an entire novel, that device might become an encumbrance. Yet I found the more I read it, it kind of vanishes. It's there, it punctuates the story, but it's more just Mimsy talking to Gerald primarily throughout the whole thing. So tell me, what prompted that approach? Is that how you started this, or did you revert to that, or tell us about it?
I am a lifelong letter writer, even now in
Mhm.
time of email and text and instant messaging. My first letter I wrote when I was going to kindergarten, and my little sister would cry when I would get on the bus, and so I would I made a little tiny letter with a little tiny worm drawing. I think it was the little worm from Richard Scarry. Um, that she would then get out of the mailbox every time I got into the bus. I'm not sure how long I did this for, but this was the first letter I remember writing. And I've continued writing, and I have many people I write to. Only one really writes back, maybe two.
Mhm.
People are busy.
Now, when you say writing, is this include emails at this point, or is it the
No,
old
I
style
also
letter
write
writing?
emails. I also write emails to people, but I prefer to write a handwritten letter. And of course, I get
Mhm.
busy. It doesn't happen as often as I like.
Sure.
But one person to whom I wrote a letter and heard nothing for years, I ran into and went to her house. We were sitting down. She was telling me all the things that had happened to her over the years when she was non-communicative. And it was just an unbelievable burden of tragedy that she'd gone through. And then she pointed to a rack beside the kitchen door, and there was my letter from years before. And the letter was about when we used to take people on new mothers on walks in nature in New York, and how wonderful that time was. And she said during the period that she struggled, when it was really bad, she'd take out my letter and she would read it, and it would
Hmm.
hearten her. And she was unable, she didn't have the strength to write back. But
Hmm.
the letter being a physical thing that you can return to um, in times of sorrow, in times of happiness. I am a big advocate of everyone writing letters, even today. That is something straight from your heart and mind that someone in your family and generations of your family can hold in their hands and basically hear you talking to them.
Yes.
And it's a treasure. It's, you know, I think it's an Antiques Roadshow level treasure of a good letter.
That's right. You're right. No question. I had the experience just the other day. I unfortunately, my brother passed away last fall, and I was going through a box in our carriage house, clearing out stuff. What do we keep? What do we don't? And I found just a note. It's a note card. And it goes back about 15 years. And I frankly had completely forgotten that he wrote it and that I saved it. And he was thanking me actually for attending the wake of one of his friends who had passed away. And then he went on this rant about computers and how it's important to write letters. And I stood there holding it. And what you just described, I got tingles because for that brief moment, he was back there sitting there. It brings people back.
Exactly. And so from the letters, I challenged myself to write the novel in the epistolary form in letters. Um, and writing a story in letters is very challenging. It took me,
Imagine.
yeah, when you're writing a regular letter, you are freed from plot, you're freed from time, you're your story can be like recursive, it can loop, you can include complete asides, unexpected things. I mean, if a butterfly lands on your paper, you might write that the butterfly's on the paper right in the middle of another story. So when you're writing for publication and it's epistolary, you have to make sure that you haven't gotten so far off the track with your asides and your recursive sense of time that you have lost the thread. Um, Also, I like the idea in this visual age, television, movies, streaming, everything, of turning around the writer's advice to show, not tell, and tell instead of show. Ever since
Interesting.
ever since humanity has been around the campfire, we have told stories. And it was only upon when the movies started, the early movies started, that we started to have competition for our stories with visual images. And we had to start showing our stories. Because I'm particularly interested in people's internal dialogue, what they're thinking, that no one ever knows unless they write it down in their diary or maybe in a personal letter that is intimate in its content. Uh, the only other way to really get to someone's internal dialogue is in a letter.
Mhm.
I mean, there's some modification for the audience or who you're writing the letter to, but in the Buoyant Letters of Mimsy Bell, the recipient is dead. So she can write whatever without fear of getting a letter back saying, contradicting her or being upset.
Yeah. But she does both. I mean, she's very reflective at many points in the letter, but at the same time, she's driving a narrative throughout this whole thing, and not one narrative. I mean, it's actually a number of intertwined narratives. But what I love is her kind of whimsical ability to go back and forth between her own reflections on what's happening, and then go on with more of what's happening. One part I loved that recurred throughout the book was her closings on the letter. I mean, sometimes it was very simple. Sometimes it was love, Mimsy. Other times it was your wildflower warrior, or the wheel of karma turns, and then most poignantly in the end, where she says, "See you soon." Tell me about how hard you worked on those endings, because a lot of them were really they were witty, they were funny, and they kind of encapsulated everything that had just preceded them.
Well, I think Mimsy is that way. She's witty and funny, and she knows her mind. And she, like, another person's favorite was the one with the mosquitoes, which if you live in Freiburg or the region, there's millions of mosquitoes. And it was Love Bites. But that's also a song. It's also a rock and roll song she might have been familiar with. But most tellingly is when she's in the fight with Gerald in the book. And she stopped. She just signs the last one of them, just the letter M. Like or Mrs. Bell, like instead.
Yes, right.
Because she's furious. There was something she didn't know that was important.
Well, that was a shocker when all of a sudden we realized who Booker was, and
yes,
I didn't see that coming. Now, speaking of that, about a quarter of the way through the book, I noticed very briefly you switch away from the format of letters from Mimsy to Gerald. And you have a letter, one from her to Booker, and there's one, I believe, from Aiden, the police officer, to Gerald. And then there's even one from Booker to Gerald. Why at that point did you decide, okay, I need to depart from this structure and still maintaining the letter format, but have these other people's voices instead of Mimsy's?
Well, Aiden, who is a young police officer, probably in his 30s, is her best friend in this book. So it's that unlikely friendship. And he's extremely protective of her. And she's talked to him a lot about Gerald and about other things that happened in her life. So when she finds out what the situation with Gerald was, and when she has her TIA, her small stroke,
right.
Aiden's angry. But at the same time, he's knows that she was going down there almost every day to send a letter. And so he figures, what, she'd be happy if I sent a letter. But he's also angry. So the second letter, he's angry.
Yeah.
And then when she's angry at Gerald, and she's writing and Booker, who had come to learn about his father, wants to know more. She's so upset she can't say the words. So she writes them to him and tells him about his father. And then in the next letter to Gerald, she's just like, that was glowing praise. Don't think I'm happy with you. And then Booker, of course, writes a letter to his father. And that, from a writer's standpoint, that adds some of Booker's backstory, but that was not why I wrote it, because that's just what someone would do in this situation. I think if you've been observing someone, communicating with someone who is now suddenly important to you, and they're throwing bottles into the water to talk to them, you might go along and do that as well.
When did that particular device come to you, the bottles? I love that idea of, especially, you've got the normal world with the postman coming every day and sometimes rescuing Mimsy from her own fate. but there was something so simple about the river as a conveyance for her letters and the bottles floating off to wherever. I find myself, I want to go down the river here and look for them. You know? Did that come early on? Like, what is she going to do with these letters?
It did because, well, obviously the river is a character, and when she's delivering the letter, she is in communication with the river as much as with Gerald. I mean, she's irritated when it's frozen over and she has to stack up the letters on her mantelpiece until spring, and she sometimes almost falls in and assumes that is enmity of the river towards her. But the bottles actually came because, like many old homesteads or old farms in Maine, my home where I grew up had dumps out back in the woods, and we used to go dig up bottles there. So those are the bottles that Mimsy would have dug up in the woods.
The old elixirs and all the different things that people put in bottles back then. Yeah. I was wondering, as I look at all of Mimsy's friends, if any of them are based on people in your life or from that community, are there any rooted in reality?
Almost everything in the book is rooted in reality. I don't make up anything, well, at least in this book. I haven't made up anything to serve the plot. And I have a sense of awe of just the amazing diversity of people and experiences, and I want those to be reflected in the book. So yes, but they're amalgams of several people. Mimsy, the person that inspired Mimsy, was nothing like Mimsy, and it was just someone that would walk along the road every day picking up trash. And then she morphed into other people I knew that sort of came together, musicians I knew, or strong women I knew. She has a lot of agency despite some of the trouble she's had in her life, and I really want to focus on that agency.
She's a survivor.
Exactly. And there is someone that one of the characters is actually someone who mixed with a few other people who I know and who read the book but did not recognize himself in the book.
Oh, really? I was going to ask you that. Oh, okay. Flew right past them, huh?
Well, I mean, it is amalgam. There's like 3 people mixed together, but I was surprised about that one.
At the risk of offending anybody who thinks they're in the book, do you have a favorite character?
My favorite character, well, obviously Mimsy, my favorite character, but my favorite secondary character is Oswald.
Oswald, how come?
I just like the idea of someone who has his problem was in life that he had done everything right and still lost the person he loved and still failed to have a lot of close friendships despite being responsible for everyone in the town.
He was the go-to guy for everyone.
Exactly.
He's like associated with everyone, but close to none, kind of. Yeah, I felt some sympathy for him on that too, and playing by the rules, and then, speaking of surprises, meeting a very untimely demise himself in probably one of his happier moments.
Exactly. Well, I try to make sure the deaths are in the happier moments. Same with that.
Talk to me about Cecile, because this is it's not all roses in a town like this. Every town has its difficulties and its dark sides, and you bring in at least shades of domestic violence and just some really horrible things, suicide through that household with with Cecile and Mackie. What did you bring her in as a need to try to leaven this story a little bit and bring a little grim reality into it?
I didn't want it to be a Hallmark Channel.
Right.
I wanted it to be real, but at the same time focus a little more on the positive. But The character of Cecile is an amalgam of someone that I know, something that happened in the town at some point, and just general things I've read in the news. And she's actually there to be Mimsy's daughter figure, the that she know the
Okay. Yeah. Well, definitely. Yeah.
But it shows sort of the underside of poverty, um, and at the same time the resilience. In some cases, her resilience eventually.
And hope. I mean, there is an element of hope there. Later on when she returns and she and Aiden are giving it the best college try they can. I mean, it was really heartening to see that there's hope, that there's a possibility there that they could emerge from all that, which was great. As I will go back to Mimsy and Gerald. Of course, Gerald's another big character here. We never really meet him, but you feel like you know him. As I reflected on Gerald and how long he'd been gone, 60 plus years, two things struck me. First was that he would always be Mimsy's true love, however short-lived that love might have been. And second, that love didn't prevent her, focused as she was on it, from sharing love with others, especially later on with Aaron, her former bandmate. What was it about Gerald? Was it he himself, or the act of falling in love at such a young age that made it impossible for her to let go of him, and in fact to come back to him at the end of her life?
I think it's three or four things. First of all, I think when you're young, you're the purest form of yourself before the world starts to mold you or grind you down. And so that's a period when two souls can meet, and they are themselves together. And then later on, you're in roles. You're a mother, you're a banker, you're a teller, you don't know what, or you've had a tragedy. He has had tragedies himself. He lost his brothers.
Right.
And that's when he sort of started the live for today way of dealing with his loss. And that brought out sort of the wild, the inherent wild, adventurous side in Mimsy, which you see throughout, and she just runs off and joins a band. She has done a lot of wild things. And Gerald was also intelligent man. He was interested in geology. And of course, the Freiburg and surrounding regions are filled with mines, with gemstones. And I remember looking in the old dump piles with my parents for what little things we could find. So that's something I wanted to.
Any tourmaline by any chance?
I did not.
Okay.
I wish I did.
Yeah.
And so he epitomizes for Mimsy the time when she was herself, purely herself, before there were demands or before other people were sort of stopping her from doing the things she wants. Her husband, Lawrence, thrilled to have her in the band, but kept her out of the composing part, and only had her come on across the stage in the middle of the song. She wasn't always on stage. So a lot of things came later that they didn't stunt her. They made her stronger, but at the same time, she wasn't accepted in the same way as she was when she was young and when she was with Gerald.
Mm-hmm. Unconditionally. It was a pure love between her and Gerald. You could tell that. Yeah. And you're right. I mean, and it's probably typical of rock bands back then, is that someone in her position would be relegated to a support role at best. That's why I was actually very heartened when late in the book, Aaron affirms her talents as a musician. And you get the feeling that this is the first time anybody's ever really said this to her, that you're good. I love the scene where he was telling her when she would be playing with her eyes closed, she couldn't see how the rest of the band was looking at her in complete awe. And I thought that must have been one of the happiest moments in her life when she heard that.
I think it was. And she suffered from imposter syndrome, which I think a lot of women actually, no matter how far they rise up, they still think they're not good enough. And in a band situation, in this particular band situation, there was so much conflict that
Yeah.
Personal problems where she would confuse them with professional problems a lot. And she was young. And there was a lot of competition. So she was definitely feeling like an imposter most of the time she was on the road.
Yeah, yeah. What makes Mimsy such a people magnet? I mean, we have these, every community has these folks who just attract people. She comes into the story essentially alone. She's retreating back to her roots, and Gerald. And she exits the story surrounded by a community of friends who, in the course of from what I can gather, is not much more than a year.
Yeah, it's a little less
roughly.
Roughly a year.
That. And they've become her extended family. What is it about Mimsy that makes her so accessible?
I think it's different than what you would think for other women that would come into community. I wouldn't say that she's, warm-hearted and generous and extroverted necessarily. I would say she is bold and truthful, and she is funny. And so when you're interacting with Mimsy, you are interacting with an authentic person. You don't have to ever question her motives. You don't think she is masking in any way when she's there. I think that's attractive to
people. Appreciate that honesty.
They appreciate her honesty, even when sometimes it's aggravating. Batty.
They don't appreciate it in the moment, maybe, but yeah, overall. I'm going to go to another audience question that pertains to Mimsy at her age. This person says, as an octogenarian, Mimsy is wrestling with her own mortality, as we all do, or have done at some point. What are you hoping people reading this, who also might be going through these feelings, might take away from this book?
Well, I've spent a lot of time with my family members who are older. I also moved to a community where most of my new friends in this town are over 70. So I feel like I have a little more a window into what is coming down the road for myself and all of us. I'm 56 myself. And I think the message is that at some point you need to make sure you've closed the book on the things that are the most important to you. And those are going to be different for every single person. And some of them will be hampered by physical limitations or the fact that maybe someone that you wanted to make amends with or you wanted to reconnect with has already passed. But that shouldn't stop you completely. You should do them while you can. Even if you're as young as 56 like me, those things should get done.
Time flies, that's for sure. You wake up one day and you're 70, boom. Now, you live currently in the Mid-Coast area, correct?
I do.
In Maine?
Yes.
So you've experienced Western Maine. We spoke about this the other day briefly, how, Western Maine, in many people's minds, when they think of Maine, they don't automatically think of Western Maine. They think about the coast, they think about down east or way up north in Corsicana. Having lived in the two communities, what similarities or differences do you see between, say, the Mid-Coast area and someplace like Freiburg? Are they, in your mind, are they distinctly different places, or are there some similarities?
I would say they're distinctly different places. In both, the particular region I lived in both here and there are both tourist areas, which makes it a little bit different than maybe an insular town up in Ulster County, or a town where most of the people's families have lived there forever, and there isn't much influx of new people. However, the landscape of each one is so different. So in the Mid-Coast, you have the ocean and the tidal rivers. You have a lot more old agricultural land, so like old fields, and you have a lot less of the native plants, native trees that would have been found maybe here before it was so heavily settled in the Damerscott region. You also have here, for example, in the Damerscott region, a lot of people from New York City, of which my husband is one. And that brings in a different vibe, a different liveliness, and they're quite accepted here and love living here and are true members of the community. So we have a lot of mixing of cultures on the mid-coast, artists, writers, that sort of thing. And then up in the Freiburg region and larger White Mountains region, you have a lot more people who are have a knowledge of the land, hunters, you have foresters, you have people, naturalists, you have mountaineers, you have people who are on the river, on the Saco River every weekend. It's a different sense of, I found that region more adventurous, more awe-inspiring. You have more storms, worse storms, more snow. You have
coming down off the mountains, yeah.
Yeah. You have mosquitoes for months at a time, and during the day too. So they have to be a little tougher to live up in the Western mountains. And some of the Western cities have been well depicted in Maine literature. Like Rumford has, I think Carolyn Shute also wrote about Western Maine.
That's right.
But it is definitely a neglected region in the Maine literature canon, partly because it's less populated than some of the other regions. And I mean, there are places there that very few people even know about, and they are, for example, state parks. And when I bring them up, no one has heard of them. So I think the people sort of tend to stick around the coastal areas when they're
yeah. Although Freiburg does have its own cachet, whether it's at one point Mimsy even documents the kayakers and the rafters and the tubers, and if you've ever I'm sure you have witnessed that spectacle on the Saco River on a Saturday afternoon in July, it's anything but serene.
No, it goes well into the night, Bill. We could hear them all partying in the party. Right. And that's one of the things about the river, especially in that part. That's a party river. And it's a dangerous river. It's dangerous because the weather changes quickly. It's dangerous because the Saco River has a very deep current, and the top of the water can look still and is moving very quickly underneath, which causes a lot of accidents. And obviously, being a party river, most everyone on it is drunk.
Yep. Oh, yeah. So, yeah. Unfortunately, it's true. I mean, things can get very tragic very quickly out there, which really plays into the whole theme of the book, is that the river giveth and the river taketh away all the time. I'm curious, you said you spent 5 years writing this book. What form did that take? You really mentioned the advice to write every day. Did you do this just, one letter after another, or did you go back and insert? What was your writing process here? Did you set aside a certain amount of time each day to write, or what?
Bill, I only wish I could set aside. I love when other writers, I would advise other writers to set aside time in the day. It sounds like mornings are great for people, but I write little tiny bits that come to me when I'm walking, in the shower, driving, at the grocery store, or otherwise doing something else. Usually when I have no paper and have found out that my iPhone won't let me record things on voice recording because the car is moving, which I thought is the purpose of voice recording. So this is what happens. This is what happens. I get an idea, a snippet of dialogue. I get an image. I see something in nature that I want to put in one of my books. And I have 5 or 6 brightly colored journals, and I get home, and if I remember it, because
that's a big if, right?
Exactly.
If you remember it.
It goes into one of the journals. Each one is for a future book. So when I get to the next book, I have a journal that has 40 pages of notes. I never face a blank page that way, which I think is an excellent thing. But it's a slow process for me because of I have a lot of responsibilities. But at the same time, doing it slowly sort of like, I think of it as slow fiction, um, allows for a lot of organic changes to happen without any pressure, because I have put no pressure on myself about finishing at this point in my life, this season. But I definitely found the two places I work best. Other people should go to their desks and write. I write best when I'm sitting in my car in the parking lot. It's like a sensory deprivation chamber. Or when I'm at the auto repair place for some reason, I just can pound out writing when I'm sitting in a place where I have no responsibilities, I don't know anyone, and I don't have to, I can focus completely. Now, I don't break the car so that
if I were to walk by you, I think you're working on your grocery list, right?
You might think that, yeah. I often will bring my computer to the auto place. So
Okay, yeah.
But generally, I write either I'm writing on the notes of my phone while I'm walking, or I'm writing in my journal.
So when did you decide, all right, I'm ready to actually have somebody, I'm ready to go to someone and ask them if they'll publish this? How did that happen? Did you just start casting about, or how? Obviously, in the acknowledgments, you mentioned folks who read along as you wrote, but you have to make that first big step, and I would imagine it's very frightening. How did that work for you?
It was frightening. I didn't have high expectations. I was ready to self-publish if necessary, because the self-publishing world in Maine is just across the country is booming, and people are putting out really good literature that way. But I had a friend at in Damascotta who gave me the name of a agent that she knew, and I sent it there. And that agent said what all the two other agents would say: I love your main character. Your writing is beautiful. I can't sell an epistolary novel to a major publisher.
Yeah,
Which I think is funny, because I think there had been 2 or 3 published very recently, some of which were made into movies, but okay. I didn't, at the time, actually, I didn't realize that literary agents are like real estate agents. They don't get paid unless they sell the book. So they can't take a chance. They can't take a chance on something they don't think is going to sell. But I had gone to pitch, Maine Writers and Publishers Association pitch, and I had talked to 2 agents there who said the same thing. And at the end of pitch, there was a lovely panel of Maine publishers. And they laughed at first because over the years they've been doing this, the panel has gotten smaller and smaller as there are fewer and fewer Maine publishers. I heard my publisher, who I thank so much for taking a chance on my book, speak. And I realized she was probably close to a contemporary with my high school teacher, Lee Sharkey, who was motivation for me at Oak Grove Coburn. And
who you mentioned in your acknowledgments, I saw. Yeah.
She was also, I think, the editor of the Buoyant Poetry Journal, and she worked with many people around the state with writing, as well as school children. And I just walked up to Agnes and said, would you by any chance know Lee Sharkey? And of course she did, and we talked about her. And Agnes asked me, she said, how did it go today? And I told her what I told you. Great character, great writing, no epistolary. And she said, I'll look at it. And I figured, oh, good, I'll get some good feedback and see what to do. And she loved it. And I'm so thankful for her for bringing Mimsy to life.
Okay.
Sort of a roundabout way.
Kind of right place at the right time, which is often how these things happen. Yeah. I have one other audience question that I wanted to get in. It's kind of unrelated, but this person says, rock music plays a big role in this book. Tell us about some of the music that inspired you while you were writing. You said you're not a musician, but you're a music fan?
I love music in the car only. So when I say that everything in the book is real, except the music part, I had to do a lot of research. I did not listen to music while writing the book. I had when I was not writing, I did listen to a lot more bluegrass music, which has a lot of fiddle in it. So I would get a sense for that. So unlike other authors who play music when they write, I wrote a book about music that had no music playing when I wrote.
What band do you think of in real life when you think about Mimsy's band? in Lawrence and Aaron.
Oh, okay. It would be like a mixture of The Doors with Jim Morrison,
Okay.
and it's like mixing Jim, like Mimsy's husband Lawrence in the book is in my mind a mixture of Jim Morrison, actually both of Aaron and he sort of are like that, and John Lennon. So you have the vocal, political side, and you have the unbelievably
The
talented
moodiness.
guy that has to be carried to the stage to get.
Oh yes, that part too. Yeah, right. We are actually running out of time. I can't believe it. I feel like we just started. What's next? You mentioned you have these journals. You're filling up journals right now. It makes me feel like there's something good in the pipeline. Anything we can look forward to?
Yeah, I'm in the home stretch of the next novel, which is also set in Menominee, and there's one major overlap character, and it is not an epistolary novel only because it involves a lot of humor and a lot of action that this book does not have. So I tried. Could not convey it in the epistolary form. So it's just in a regular novels form. And hopefully my wise readers will be getting it sometime next month, I hope.
Oh,
And
excellent. So it's almost ready, huh?
it's almost ready.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, we'll have to have you back because you've whetted a lot of appetites here, I think, with Mimsy. And I don't think anybody. I hope there's some reference to Mimsy because nobody wants to let her go. And I know she's gone. I know that the canoe came and got her, but she lives on. She really does. And I want to thank you for writing it. I also want to thank you for joining us tonight. It's been a delightful conversation, and we look forward to your next work.
Thank you so much, Bill. I really appreciate the time, and I hope everyone enjoys Mimsy because everyone needs Mimsy in their life.
Oh, don't we all? And everybody needs a river.
They do.
It's not something like we'll finish where we started. There's something about the power of a river. It's like nothing else. Laurel, thanks again.
Thank you.
And thanks again to all of you for joining us tonight. Also, thanks once again to Sherman's Maine Coast Bookshops, the Park Danforth, and Coffee by Design for your support of tonight's event. Our next book club meeting is going to be on May 22nd at 7 p.m. when we will take on Where the Forest Meets the River. This is by Shannon Bowring, who you might recall joined us with her earlier novel last year. As always, that meeting will be live streamed on Facebook and YouTube. We hope to see you then. And until then, have a great night, everyone. Good night.